E kore e taia he te whenua kotahi, ki te raranga i te whāriki. Kia mohi o tātou ki a tātou, mā te mahitahi o ngā whenu, mā te mahitahi o ngā kairaranga, ka oti tēnei whāriki. I te otinga a tāna wā, me te tiro tātou ki ngā mea pai, ka puta mai. Me te tiro hoki ki ngā raranga i mākere, nā te mea he kōrero anō kei reira. That kōrero was composed by my kaumātua, by my mentor, my whanaunga, Kukupā Tirikātane. Its translation: the tapestry of understanding cannot be woven by one strand alone. Only by working together of strands and the working together of weavers will such a tapestry be completed. When it is complete, in time, let us look at the good that comes from it. We should also look at those stitches which have been dropped, as they also have a message. I would like to talk today of one of the drop stitches. Around September last year, I ran into a friend, Ken Clearwater. Ken had a badge on his chest with the words 1 in 6 on it. I looked at Ken, and in my typical way I went, "Oh, Ken, come on, man, get into the modern world. We were both at high school when we changed to the decimal system. Come on, man, get into the real world." Ken's response shocked me. No, Mark. The 1 in 6 is the sexual abuse rate of New Zealand males. It's one of New Zealand's best kept secrets. No one talks about it. The female rate is 1 in 3. Although this rate is talked about, the kōrero is muted or seems to be ignored. Ken told me of a conference he was part of hosting called South-South Institute. It was to host international participants in the field of and victims of sexual abuse to talk on the issue, to raise awareness. He invited me to speak and to participate at the conference, which I did. I can say that the veil of ignorance around male sexual abuse was lifted from my mind at that conference. The kōrero from Judge Carolyn Henwood at that conference on the review of children under state care gave another shock. The abuse rates of boys and girls roughly equal. The gender of the abusers roughly equal. At the time of the conference, and in conjunction with, the Canterbury Museum launched the photographic exhibition Bristlecone Project. Bristlecone Project is exhibited in a number of countries. I welcomed those who came to the museum for the opening, including the photographer David Lissick and the 24 New Zealand males who were the subject of the exhibition. The Bristlecone Project exhibition was the photograph of each of the 24 men who had been abused, with their stories in print beside each of their photos. The walk from the welcoming area to the exhibition was quiet and a bit sombre, given the Toki. The talk in the exhibition room was muted. The eyes within each photo pulled you with the emotion shown. The written stories brought a what? In one, the abuser was grandma. Grandmas don't do this sort of thing. In another, the abuser was mum and the eldest first cousin. Every type of abuse you could imagine was on the wall. Why? Why would you do this? The shocks I have spoken of are not the first I've had in this arena. I've been a member of the Police Commissioner's Māori Focus Forum since 2007. In September 2015, he sent to me the 2014 police statistics on family violence. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. 102,000 family violence call-outs, encapsulating 274,000 women and children under this. Each call-out averaging 65 minutes. To put that into its context, 102,000 call-outs times 2 policemen times 65 minutes per call-out, divided by 60 to put it in hours, 221,000 hours of police time just for the 2 officers to turn up to the home. Statistically, only 1 case in 5 is ever reported. The potential victim rate in New Zealand, 1.3 million plus. Highest levels of intimate partner violence in the OECD countries. That is our record. Māori women, around 7% of the population, but around 50% of all Māori women have been or are victims of family violence. Here in Canterbury, the Women's Refuge, fill each time the All Blacks or the Crusaders lose over a game. And I'm told just yesterday at a tangi that it's the same in other regions. Your team loses, the refuge is full to overflowing. In Christchurch on the 1st of July 2016 and in Waikato October 2016, the Integrated Safety Response pilots started. The pilots are a collaborative process between the police, Crown agencies, NGOs and iwi to address family harm. All parties meet daily at the police station to review previous night family harm episodes. Each case put through a safety assessment meeting, levels of violence measured, family safety plans put together to address. In the month of July 2016, the figures for Christchurch were 2,500 call-outs by the police, 1,500 Pākehā families, 600 Māori families, 300 Pacifica, 100 Asian, 1 South American family. But up to April 2018, in the two cities, Hamilton and Christchurch, with the Integrated Safety Response pilot, 57,429 people have been involved in family harm incidents. 35,112 call-outs, 20,415 of those episodes involving children in that harm. 20,816 children involved in those episodes. The perpetrators, 71% male, 28% female. The victims, 29% male, 71% female. In November 2015, I spoke of the Police Commissioner's report at the Ngāi Tahu Huia Iwi. I gave the data, the numbers involved. I spoke to Ngāi Tahu of the foundation of our culture being our whakapapa, which is a belief that I hold. But I asked the question, if whakapapa is the foundation of our culture, why are we turning a blind eye to this issue? We all know that it goes on within our families, but we all tend to turn our backs. Not my family, it's that one across the road, but it is in our families. The women, the children, the men that have been abused are part of our whakapapa. I asked the question and asked permission of Ngāi Tahu, could I come out into the communities to start to talk about this issue? I received a standing ovation. The reality for me is the only ones who can stop this violence amongst us is us. The police can't do it, the doctors can't do it, the nurses, all the agencies that deal with the issue of family violence, sexual abuse, they can't stop it. Only we can. I can't, but we can. And we have to start by saying it is not acceptable, in my whānau. To date, I've held 16 hui across Te Waipounamu. We went out calling the process Te Manakaha o Te Whānau, a tūpono Te Manakaha o Te Whānau. 16 hui, the first 8 was going into the communities talking about the issues, putting all the data in front of them, asking them for their feedback. How do we address this issue? I heard horror stories. I heard the story of one young girl, 11 years old, when she was first sexually abused by her uncle. She never said anything to anybody. Just before her 12th birthday, she heard, in her words, Uncle Touchy-Feely was coming to visit. So she came up with her own plan. She went into her bedroom, she put on her bathing togs, and she filled the whole crotch area with pins. She then put on her pyjamas and hopped in bed and waited for Uncle. And in came Uncle. Uncle grabs a handful of pins and goes rushing out of the room. The young girl goes out in front of her parents, pulls her pyjama pants down, shows what she's done, look at his hand. At the age of 63, she had never seen that uncle again since that day, but made the statement, but If I had my chance, I'd kill him. She's carried that all her life. I met with one other family where a young woman was interfered by her father. She had challenged him, but she had challenged him in the start by divulging what had happened to a cousin in the early hours of the morning, thinking he was the only one hearing, but he wasn't. A number of her other cousins were also listening. When I met this young woman, she'd been 2 years into counselling, not in dealing with the issue of the sexual abuse, but in counselling on how to deal with her family. One part of her family had turned against her because she dared to raise this issue about her father. The other part had turned against her because she refused to take it to the police. So 2 years of this poor woman having to undergo counselling simply to deal with the whānau, not to deal with the issue of the abuse. In that first round of going across the community, one of the most common things we heard, you are the first that have ever come into our community to talk about the issue. In those hui, we had a lot of perpetrators stand up and divulge what they had done. Most of them in the rural areas would ask the question, but where do we go? There are nothing in our communities to deal with this issue. I'm a low income. I can't drive to the city to attend counselling. There is nothing here for us. And we heard that story repeated in every rural community we went in. 16 hui have been held to date. Close to 800 whānau have been involved. And it's simply about talking over the issue and what are the solutions that we can put up. To a number of the marae in the South Island, you will now go, there will be a sign at the gate, tūpono, te manakaha o te whānau. This marae is violence-free. But dealing with this issue brings a lot of hardship that goes with it. And speaking simply from a Māori perspective, if we are true to the call of whakapapa, then one of the things that we all have to do tribally is clean our paipai up. No man that is an abuser in any form should be allowed to have the honour of representing the people on the paipai while they're an abuser. They should be removed. They should not be allowed to speak on behalf of the family. We all have this concept that the sexual abuse occurs out there. That is not correct. Over 90% of all sexual abuse is within the whānau or with close family friends. It happens in the house. We all have this perception that the sexual predator grooms the children. I would argue it's the exact opposite. They groom mum and dad, uncle and auntie, grandma and granddad to get access. And we open our doors. In a counselling hearing that I was involved in on my own marae, the counsellor asked a question, how many people in this room have had people around to your house having a few drinks, your children are up in bed, your visitors are going up and down to the bathroom, who checks? In a room of 52 people, not one person put their hand up. Why not? If over 90% of all sexual abuse is family or family friends, why aren't you doing your jobs? I naively said, so you mean I've got to watch my brother? Yes, and he's got to watch you. Listen to my data. Over 90% of sexual abuse is within the family or close family friends. Do your job. Protect your children. When he came onto our marae, the first thing he talked about was our playground. You have a playground behind a 6-foot fence. Grow up. Get rid of the fence. That's the perpetrator's playground. You can't see what's happening with the children. We no longer have a 6-foot fence around our playground on the marae. The processes are cruel. My own sister was involved in a sexual abuse case against our first cousin. A first cousin that I've had an amazing relationship with all my life. A first cousin that I actually love. But he raped my sister as a minor when my sister was 7. He raped another cousin as a minor. He has been through a court process, he has been convicted. But what do we do afterwards? He's still whānau, We now have to be on guard forever to protect others. So what do we do as a whānau? What do we do with that cousin? These are not easy issues to deal with. As I said earlier in my speech, the sexual abuse rate against women is 1 in 3. Now this data has been out amongst us for quite a number of years. But as I say, the conversation on this is very muted. Where is the horror of looking at a figure like that, where 1 in 3 of all of our women are sexually abused? Where 1 in 6 of our men are sexually or physically or mentally abused? Why aren't we doing our job as community? Why aren't we doing our job as whānau? It is not acceptable that my grandmother, my auntie, my mother, my sister, my cousins are part of this abuse. And again, only we can stop this. We have to say, this is not acceptable in our family. The data that we as a nation have the highest level of intimate partner violence in all of the OECD country. I am so proud not of us. This is a terrible indictment on us as a community. Only we can stop this. The museums, Bristlecone is a part of that journey where we need to talk out about this. We need to talk about the solutions. We need to do our job, which is looking after, protecting and nurturing our whānau. Tēnā tātou.
Well, that was a bit sobering, wasn't it? Now the fun begins. Wondering, if you have some questions or would like to have a discussion here with Mark about some of those sobering statistics and the challenges that he has set for us, both on our marae, but also within our institutions, about how we have these difficult conversations and in fact lead some of these conversations for the wellness and the health of our people and of our iwi. So I wonder, to start the ball rolling, Mark Soloman, sir. My question would be, so you spoke about the Bristlecone exhibition as an example of what a museum might do to raise this type of social consciousness. What other suggestions have you got for us, kind sir?
Well, one of the things I'd like to look at, this issue with the women's refuge is filling, every time that a rugby team loses, the Crusaders or the All Blacks. As I said yesterday at a tangi, I was told by a woman who leads the refuges on the east coast of the North Island, exactly the same thing happens there when their local team loses. The refuge is full to overflowing. That's a story in its own that needs to be looked at. The nation's main sport, and this is what it creates. It's a game, but it creates so much high tension that a number of our men go home and beat the hell out of their wives or their children because their team lost. That's a story that the museums could tell. It's an indictment on us as a society, in my view. I don't want to see my grandmother, my aunties, my sisters, my cousins, male or female, beaten. But we need to tell the story, we need to talk about it. As I said earlier, the data on the abuse of women has been known in this country actually for quite a number of years. But the conversation, other than the women that actually deal in the field in this nation, is almost silent. It's muted. We don't talk about it. If you just look around you, 1 in every 3 women in this room has been affected by this nonsense. Are we to be proud of that? I don't think so. Again, I think it's something that we all need to be talking about. And I think the museums could lead this conversation of how do we as a nation look at this issue of the violence, sexual, physical, mental, that we tend to impose upon each other on a regular basis. So I do think the museums can help, be part of the conversation. And I definitely can't see anybody, so if you've got your hand up, I can't see you.
Anyone who has a question for Mark? Tommy?
Do you dispute my data? I think those connections are there. You mentioned the refuge that you worked in. That's one of those connections. To start this, we need to talk to each other. And I get quite often asked about the issue of cultural safety. You know, how do you do things? To me, it's very simple. It always starts with, hello, my name is Mark Soloman. Then we can engage in a debate. All of these groups that are out there that have been dealing in this field for decades can give you all the support you need to be able to push this story out into the community. But again, it's as simple as, hello, I'd like to talk. I'd like to start the conversation. And the woman that I attended yesterday, 30, nearly 40 years of dealing with the aftermath of male violence against women. The most beautiful soul I've ever known, but she dealt in that hara for nearly 35 to 40 years and kept her sanity. I don't know how she did it, but people like her are the ones that need to be at the forefront and talking on this issue alongside with the museums. You got that badge on, Ken? Well, thanks, Ken. I mean, Bristlecone project to me was a real lifting of the veil of my ignorance around male abuse. looking at the photographs of 24 men that had been sexually, physically and mentally abused, one of the things that stood out with each of the photographs was the eyes. In some you saw rage, in others you saw hate, and most you saw the damage, the hurt. Those eyes were the most telling part of that project. And I have a sister, as I said, that was raped. All her life since it happened, you can see in her eyes what's happened to her and what's plagued her for all of her adult life, because it's never been properly addressed. And it was addressed in a sense in a court last year. If you take a very wide way of looking at it, and I'll discuss this because it was a shock to me. My cousin had been taken to court. I had been asked by the police not to attend the court case. So Mark, you're a publicly known figure. If you turn up to the case, you will turn it into a media circus. So please do not come to the court case. I agreed on the proviso that if he was found guilty, I could stand in the court on the day of sentencing with my sister. And I need to put on the table that my sister could not charge him, even though she was his first victim, because when he raped her, he was a minor, and you cannot charge a minor. So she was brought into the court case by the police prosecution as what's known as a propensity witness. She was there to show the scale of his offending. But ultimately, he was convicted of abuse against 2 of his nieces. And it sort of went like this. Mr. Sterling, for 8 of the charges against your elder niece, I sentence you to 2 years, 9 months jail, letting the victims know previously that because the charges were historic, he had to go back to the era of the offences in his sentencing. Back then, a maximum sentence was 4 years. If he'd offended in the 90s or after that, it was 8 years. So for 8 of the charges, I sentence you to 2 years, 9 months jail. For the other 6 charges against your younger niece, which were of a lesser level, I add to your sentence 6 months. So in total, I sentence you to 3 years, 3 months jail. I will now read out the victim impact statement, and it was a letter from the elder niece, who described in her letter what her life had become like. But right in the last sentence, she put the wording, "But I forgive my uncle." So the judge immediately cut the sentence in half, because one of the victims had forgiven him. Then the defence lawyer leapt to his feet. "Hang on, Your Honour. 5 days ago, the Christchurch press ran an article on my client publicly vilifying him. Therefore, I believe that leads to a reduction in the sentence." Says the judge, "I agree with you. I will take another 35% off. Mr. Sterling, I now sentence you to 11 months home detention." I stood beside my sister and held her while she collapsed at what she believed was the injustice. But he has been convicted. Whether he likes it or not, he is now on a paedophile list, because his 2 victims, when he interfered with them, were 4 years old. And on the 1st of every month, my sister posts his photograph on Facebook, "Beware paedophile." And she will do that for the rest of her life. She ran into him in the Northlands Mall just before Christmas. She stood in the centre of the mall, yelling, pointing at him, "Beware paedophile, watch your children," until he ran from the mall. But to have a sentence reduced from 3 years, 3 months jail because the victim has forgiven him, to me, is not acceptable. But it's done. So the processes of going through the court are not easy. In fact, they're very, very cruel for the victims, because there certainly does seem to be a different level of protecting, if I can put it that way, the integrity of the process for the offender. But it's not a pleasant process for the victim. I mean, one of the things that stunned, I received a phone call from a deranged person who had just received a summons from the police to attend the court case. And the derangement come from screaming at me over the phone, I'm the victim, not the perpetrator. Why am I being summoned to court? It makes me feel like I'm the one that's in the wrong. I personally had to ring the head of Christchurch Police, John Price, and ask him, please do not send a policeman around to deliver the summons. Give me a couple of days to calm my sister down. I'm warning you, if you send an officer around with the written copy of the summons, she will drop him. And she's quite capable of doing so. Let me calm her down. But put yourself in her shoes. She was raped. Her perpetrator is before the courts, but as the victim, she gets summons to the court. Now, I tried to explain to my sister this is a process. It's not personal, and she understands that. But from her perspective, that summons was one of the final insults against her and her rape. So, we've got lots to talk about on how we deal with these issues, even in that process.
If this is a failure of whānau and a failure of the law, what can be done right away to change public policy, either by museums or just individuals or communities, to change public policy? Because it seems like there's a failure there that we have the power to do something about. If it's that family over there or someone else, we can change the structure of how it's treated.
We need to have the dialogue. We've got to continuously have the dialogue. It's like the revelations that have come out of Hollywood. It's just growing and growing and growing because people now are consistently talking about it. We need to do the same in our country. We need to change public process by having the discussion. We need to confront it. We need to face what's going on. As I said, 1 in 3 women in this room, that's the stats. Look around this room. What are we doing about this? How can we just sit there and ignore it? We've got to have the conversation. It's got to be talked about. We've got to challenge everywhere until there is change. It's our responsibility. And I mean that. Our. Not mine, not yours, ours. Only we can change this. We need to engage in the dialogue. We need to put it as it is. It isn't acceptable. None of our children should be part of a sexual game from some predator. None of us. None of our women should be. None of our men should be. And one hui I went to on a marae, other than those that organised the hui, and it was to discuss sexual abuse. 23 people came to that hui. Out of that 23, 12 women and 2 men stood and talked about their rape. Out of 23. That's the issue that's in front of us. But until we start talking, it's just going to continue to be hidden, to be ignored. Don't talk about it, hide it. In my own community, I'd argue that we've broken into 3 camps. There's those that are standing beside the victims, and that's all we can do. They make a decision to go to court, we go to court and stand with them. Of course, there's the group that will defend the perpetrator. But what I've found to my experience, the worst group is the group that wants it hidden, wants it buried. Don't talk about it. The problem with not talking about it is that it continues. When we do confront it, things start to change. And you have to make some of these things personal. On my marae, the first cousin arrives one day, big set of sunglasses on. Inside the wharenui for an hour, still got the sunglasses on. Cousin, there's no sunlight inside. You don't really need those sunglasses. Take your glasses off. Oh, no. Come on, my cousin, take your glasses off. So she did. She had an eyeball that looked like a ball of blood. She had a big bruise around her eye. And then I got the story. Oh, Mark, last night I had the worst migraine of my life. I said, my cousin, maybe I could accept that a migraine might burst a blood vessel, but no migraine I've ever heard of leaves a bruise all around your eye socket. In my medical training, that's called a fist. And then her husband walked in. You, get over here. Don't ever let us see our cousin like this again. You have no right to do this. This is totally unacceptable. If you cannot abide by our rules, get out of our family. But we're not going to allow you to beat our cousin like this. And I make a particular stance. I'll stop them anywhere, on the street, in public. If I see any of my cousins, female or male, with bruises, I'll stop them on the street and ask, what happened? And I'll do that in any forum now, because the issue is so big. 1 in 3, 1 in 6. There's your issue. That's what we have to talk about. I'm told by the police that roughly 60% of all their time today is family violence. 60%. That's why the policeman's not turning up to your house until a day after the burglary, because he's dealing with the family violence. And when I gave that report from 2014 back then, each call-out averaged 65 minutes. Today's average is 95 minutes. 60% of police time, family violence. There's your issue.
Hi, I'm
Kia ora.
Jennifer Storer from the Canterbury Museum, Deputy
Jennifer.
Director there. I think that silence continues when there's shame and fear, and when we in museums feel like we're inside and the issue is outside. I'd actually like for people to make it personal, and I won't turn around and look, but I'd like anybody who has suffered from domestic violence or in their family, sexual, mental, emotional abuse, to stand up with me and show that it's not just outside our museums, it's the people who are working in them. It's not just outside. So would anyone stand with me? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Just earlier this year, I was a patron of a police wing, Wing 312, 59 young cadets. One of their training days was around the issue of family violence. Each week, one of the cadets would write to me of their week's training. And this young woman wrote to me about the family violence section. In her letter, she said that the whole day was totally silent. Not one of the cadets spoke. They just sat all day listening to what was being put in front of them. When they got back to the college that night and talked, just on half of the cadets had personally experienced family violence, family abuse. The other half had never. But what stunned them all, whether they had been part of the abuse or not, was the scale of what was put in front of them by the police training. How big this issue is in our country. So half of that wing had personally experienced abuse, violence, where the other half hadn't. But all were totally stunned by the scale of what they have to confront with as police officers. Thank you. First one. So when I initially started, I'd taken it and requested of Ngāi Tahu, could I come out into their communities to talk about the issue? We did 2 hui, and then I received a request from Ngāti Kuia at Te Horo Marae Canvas Town. Would we come and do our program on their marae, which I did last year. At the end of it, their chairman stood up and said, Mark, this is not just a Ngāi Tahu issue. This is right across the island. we would like to formally invite you to bring this back out to all of the tribes of Te Tauihu. So we've started doing that. And I attended a meeting last December. I was requested to come in, and I went to this marae. We have a 7-step program that we use, which is basically 7 sets of questions. We break the group up into 7, and they come back and give solutions to the questions we put up. On this first marae, we went through the whole process. I would say that it was a resounding success, and we got right to the end and we were just winding up when a woman stands up and she slams a toko, a walking stick onto the ground. I have a question. How come when he calls this meeting house is full? And you're all sitting there shaking your heads, yes, 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 yes. I have personally been raising these issues on this marae for 30 years. I've been spat on, I've been beaten up. My house has been vandalised, my car has been vandalised, my children have been beaten up. But when he calls this hui, you're all sitting here saying yes, 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 yes. And Mark, this is not about you. But I want to know why you're all sitting here today saying yes. Just 6 months ago, we buried, and she named this man, and every one of you men sat on that pai, and when you spoke about him, we had in front of us, lying in front of us, an angel. But every one of you men know that that man was an active paedophile. But on the day of his tangi, he became this angel. How come? Now here's the perpetrators on our marae. Bang, 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 she named the lot. Oh no, dear. Then a whole meeting house going, oh no, because she'd lifted the lid off the box. Whoa, whānau, the lid is well and truly off now. What are we doing about this? So they've started a whole chain of processes on how to address the issue in their community. The second night, I went to another marae in Te Tauihu. Same thing, right through the whole process. At the end, a man stands up, well, I'm sick of this nonsense. Here's all the perpetrators on this marae. Named the lot. Sitting in the audience in plain clothes was a police inspector. I went up to him afterwards. Well, Dexter, you've now sat through the whole process. You've watched what we're doing on tūpono, te manakaho o te whānau. What do you think? Unbelievable. I cannot believe what's been put on the table and how honest the conversation is. Dexter, you need to acknowledge who you are to the people. So we did. My name is Inspector Dexter Trial. I've now been sent down into this region. You have a huge paedophile ring operating here. There's been 3 arrests to date. There are a lot more to come. We are here to give any support whatsoever to any of the initiatives that you wish to put in place. So yes, it is going over the other maraes, and I've just been requested after the last hui, would I take tūpono te manakaha o te whānau into the North Island. It definitely will go, but I don't know whether it will be me. My time's pretty heavily engaged. Now, what was your second question, please, about whether it should be led? I think it can be both. In fact, it's not about iwi, it's not about institution, it's about us as a community. This is who the issue is hitting. We all need to take a lead on this. The lead I've taken is I'm speaking about it everywhere. I'm challenging everywhere. You can do the same within your institution, or you can do it the same within your own family. But we have to take the steps. We have to speak out.
Hiya, I have a couple of questions from Slido. So first is an anonymous question asking, how do we manage the grief and anger unleashed when we exhibit on sexual abuse?
Difficultly. I've dealt with a number of victims of sexual abuse. It's an incredibly difficult area to work in, and you do need professional help in some cases. But one of the things that's fascinated me, since I got involved in this, since I started talking about it, I would argue that, on average, I get 3 disclosures of sexual abuse a week. In fact, I had one, a young woman arrived in my house here in Christchurch just last Thursday and divulged to me the sexual abuse against her by her stepfather and the sexual abuse against her 17-year-old sister. On the next day, we took her to the police station with her sister, and they have filed charges against the stepfather. I walked into a Ngāi Tahu board meeting, not one of the parent body, but one of our subsidiaries. And it was the day after my name appeared in the paper alongside my cousin when he was convicted or found guilty of sexual abuse. I walked into the room, one of our directors, a man in his 70s, just stood up, walked up to me and put his arms around me, and he's whispering in my ear, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. What are you thanking me for? I'm a victim of sexual abuse by my father. I have never had the courage to challenge him until I read that article yesterday with your name alongside your cousin's. I got incensed. I went straight round to my father and challenged him. I am 72, my father is 92. It is the first time I've ever challenged. Thank you, thank you." About 15 minutes after that, I walked out of our building to cross the road to a cafe when an old Ngāi Tahu woman called out to me, "Come here, dear." I walked up to her, her arms went around me, and then I got the words, "My marae next, dear, it's rife." As I say, at least 3 times a week, someone divulges their abuse to me. That's been part of getting involved in this. I know Ken, who spoke and thanked me about the Bristlecone project, he's been dealing with this issue for years. How he and those people have worked like this for years astounds me. But they do, and they won't walk away from it, and nor should you. Kia ora.
Next anonymous question is, in Australia, the sports organisations are taking a lead and speaking out. How can we link the museums and sports organisations to do this here?
Well, I think they should be doing it. We should be proud that they're doing it. And again, it's a conversation between the two. Start the process. Talk about it. I've been engaged and called in as part of an advisory group for MSD on those that were held under state care and the issues that were raised. You know, I went to Kurī prison just Monday, and I spoke to 4 men who'd been through the processes, taken from their family as young children, sexually abused, physically abused, mentally abused. One of them had written his issue, put a claim into MSD 18 months ago, and still has not received a response. One asked for psychological help and was flatly refused. And I couldn't believe this, and we were talking to them without the MSD. So I said, "Please, taiho." So I went straight out, "Come in here, please. You need to answer this question because we can't." This man here requested psychological help through MSD and was refused. Is that how the processes work? Absolutely not. We will have a list of psychologists to you by tomorrow morning. And they did. But he'd been denied when he went through the process. It's issues that have hounded them all their lives. It's issues that have mentally affected them all their lives. They need the counselling. I think in the sexual abuse stuff in Australia, through the state service, you know, when kids have been taken into state care, they are guaranteed that psychological help for the rest of their lives. We're only looking at 3 to 6 sessions. Not good enough. These people carry these scars all their lives. They need to learn how to deal with it. It's why a number of them are in prison, because of their past lives. It's what we've created through our systems. You know, most of those kids that were taken into care were taken not because of issues with the children, it was issues with the parents. So they're taken for their safety and put into an institution that just perpetuates all the violence they've had all previously, maybe. But we've done this to these children. Other gang members out there, you know, the ones that got mongrel mob, black power, stormtrooper, other ones that went through all those processes that we imposed upon them. We as a community, as a society. We're now reaping what we've created, what we've sown. We've got a lot of work ahead of us to cure this ill, this hara that's amongst us as a community. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I feel a lot of grief in my heart, and I'm just wondering if you have a sense of hope, and if you do, where that is coming from.
I'd always describe myself as the Perpetual Optimist. I like to look at the good that's out there. Yes, I think there's hope, but it's like anything. If it's hidden, it self-perpetuates. If we start talking about it, it's brought it out into the full glare of the spotlight. And perhaps it'll open the minds that we need to address this. But no, in some ways I think getting involved in all of this has made me stronger, but it certainly has lifted the rose-tinted glasses and chucked them way back behind me, because life is not like how I used to look, just for the good. Life has a lot of negative with it, and we have to confront. Go to play. Yes.
They worked in social services, they brought that to their beach in Makana, and they put on this film evening and invited all the community in to say, you know, we're bringing this Māori film over, we're going to have popcorn, we're going to have all of this happening on the beach. Beautiful families rocked up, hard families rocked up, and they played Once for Warriors. And that had a huge impact on that community, in the sense that all around the outskirts of that, where they were seated, had the social services, and all the women and men were invited to come and partake and go to those social services and get help. Now that was a huge impact for her. Yep. And of course she told me the story, and I said, oh my goodness, I have to tell my whanaunga Tim. So 5 years later, I was able to talk to him about this and the impact that it made across in our ohana over in Hawaii. And he was just dumbfounded. 2018, one of my whanaunga from Ngāti Whakahaere starts talking publicly about perpetration on our paipai.
Aye.
A huge impact. People in our community wanted to deafen her, but because she's an artist, a creative person, she actually visualised it. And now she's creating these superheroes and talking about the stories in which, how they impact on our community. Not, you know, these are just everyday people doing everyday things. That's a great challenge. I think this is an important challenge. I think work is happening around in our rohe by different organisations. It's not the It's Not Okay campaign, branded, but it's our whānau, it's our hapu, it's our iwi that are making these contributions however they can. And making an impact on our paipai is possibly one of the biggest things in our
yes.
in our rohe, in our hapu, because most of those perpetrators are dying off, but the legacy is still there. So as creative institutions, I think that's a great challenge for us to bring that to the forefront. Don't worry about the funding. Don't worry about how people are going to react. Just worry about how people are going to be heard. How those people are going to have that mentor to be put on top. So kia ora, Mark.
I went to Once for Warriors. I took 2 Māori friends, both women, who howled all the way through the movie. When I come out, I said, gee, come on, girls, it's just a movie. No, Mark, that was our life. That's what we lived like. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I never lived like that. But they did. And there's lots out there like that. That's what we have to address. I'll finish with this. In my street, my wife and I bought a home in 1979. We were a new subdivision and we were a whole street of newly married couples. 44 years later, there's 2 of us from that street that are still married. But in that street, we had a Pākehā lady that everyone called the street busybody. I always called her the street's hero. She had a young Māori couple that lived next door to her, and a beautiful couple, until he took a drink. And as soon as he took a drink, this monster appeared. And it would only take 1 glass. This little Pākehā lady would hear him start to wind up. She'd immediately ring the police, and then she'd just walk straight into his house and stand in front of his wife. Come on, Kit, hit me, the police are coming. Now, everyone in our street called her the street busybody. To me, that little lady was the street hero. Kit and Serena are still married. Like my wife and I, they've been married for 44 years. It was that little busybody Pākehā lady that interfered that turned that family around. Because she cared. That's what we have to do. Thank you.